gosh, thank you so much for coming to Malvern Books, everyone. I'm really excited about this reading. I've been looking forward to it. So the first reader we have today for Amazing Poets happens to be National Poetry Month too, which just makes it all the more special to be here. So first up we have Sid Miller. Sid Miller lives in Vancouver, Washington with his wife and identical twin 6-year-old boys. He is the owner of the Triple Lindy, a neighborhood bar in Northwest Portland, and the author of 3 full-length books of poetry, and is the founder and editor of Burnside Review Press. All right, please welcome Sid.
All right, thanks y'all for having me. It's first time in Austin. I've had a really great time. Super place. Yeah, so I'm the editor of Burnside Review. We've been around since 2004, and we were lucky enough to put out Montreux's book. Is kind of the reason I'm even here. We kind of figured out that maybe we could do this together in Texas, and so over the course of reading countless amount of manuscripts over the years, 2 years ago we came across a manuscript that was unlike anything we'd ever found. We have really tight parameters of when you have to submit a book to us, of what it has to be. It has to be like under 64 pages, so we opened this one, it was 200 pages. And I was like, normally we would just kind of, all right, this is outside of the box, we're not gonna even look at it, but I looked at the first poem and I was kind of drawn in, and I started reading, like, this is really bizarre manuscript. So I did some little poking around and I found out who wrote it, and then I kind of did a search on who it was, and it was a man named Mark Balmer, who was a poet and somewhat of a political activist, to raise attention for his political beliefs. He would take very long walks, like across the country, long walks. He had just started out on a walk from Florida that he was going to go to the West Coast, and this has all been covered by the Washington Post and the New Yorker. You could read more about it. And about 3 days into his journey, he was walking along the interstate and was killed by a truck driver who was like blazingly high on amphetamines, and was killed instantaneously. We found this book and we're like, oh my God, I don't know what to do with it. I kind of found some friends in common, ended up getting in touch with his father, and about for the last year I've been working with his father and some old friends and some kind of colleagues of mine. I'm trying to put together this book to bring out to the world, because it's really, there's nothing like it, and we feel like this is something, I don't know, we feel like this is something really worthy of our effort. You know, we don't get to do a lot of work that I think really means something, and this I think is a chance to do that. So anyway, a long introduction for a poem of his that I'm just going to read one of these. This poet, Jeff Alessandrelli, who is one of our authors, has been working on this with me, and he's been traveling on a new book, and he's been reading some of his poems too, and they've gone over really well. None of these poems have titles, so I'm just going to start. 2 buddies were standing in an empty field. These 2 buddies were at an interesting point in their lives. Both of them enjoyed where they were standing. One of the buddies bent down and touched the field. The other buddy nodded and said, "I know, buddy." Neither buddy was sure what to do next. The 2 buddies were aware that they were just 2 buddies, but they were also aware almost every other person in the world was not a buddy. It was almost like the 2 buddies were no longer part of the world everyone else belonged to. One of the buddies said, "Whoa, buddy." The other buddy just slowly mumbled something unintelligible. The 2 buddies were trying hard to just be 2 buddies. They wanted their entire lives to exist only in whatever present moment they were living. One of the buddies turned to the other buddy and said, "Buddy?" The other buddy said, "Yeah, buddy." The two buddies looked at each other for a long time before one of them turned away and said, "Never mind, buddy." A car stopped next to the field. The two buddies climbed into the car and it began moving. One of the buddies said, "Hey buddy, I like your car." The other person driving the car looked at the buddy and then at the other buddy. The two buddies smiled. The car slowed down and stopped on the side of the highway. The two buddies climbed out. The car drove away. One of the buddies said, "Buddy?" The other buddy was going to say something but didn't. There was a gas station next to the highway. The two buddies looked at the gas station and waited for it to make a facial expression. One of the buddies sighed and said, "Buddy, I don't think gas stations can make facial expressions." The other buddy nodded and said, "Hey buddy, where are we going?" There was silence. A few minutes passed. It got dark. As the moon began to float into the sky, one of the buddies said, "I don't know anymore, buddy." So this is a very strange manuscript. Anyway, I felt good to read that, so I've been working on this thing, and hopefully someday that book will appear in a bookstore just like this. I'm just going to read a few poems of mine and then clear the stage. This is called Fortune. I knew a rabbi who had a stuffed squirrel on a windowsill that looked down onto his desk. The squirrel smelled not like death, a cosmos in each eye. This squirrel before me has only one eye. In it, the world is flat. I am not man enough to reach my finger into the hole where the other should be. So I've lived in Portland-ish area for about 20 years. This is about, I'm sure for people who have lived in Austin for a long time, it's kind of a similar thing. People who come to Portland now, because it's a cool city to live in, have a very different knowledge of what Portland is than what I do. I knew it when it was just kind of gritty and blue collar and punk rock, and now it's something for TV shows and tourists, and it's a whole different thing. And this poem's kind of about what Portland used to be like. Exile on Foster. I worked past the first winter to yesterday, when someone was stabbed to death on the street behind me, the first day of spring. Pistols were drawn outside my back window. A police sniper crouched on my neighbor's roof. We gathered at the end of the block for the first time, the neighbors, like a poor man's united nation, smelling of beets, cocaine, and body odor. The crack dealer, the laborer, the bartender, the ice cream man. On this side of the city that's yet to be in fashion, we share two things, a history of before here and a feeling for having settled. In a city of trees, there are few here, yet an abundance of birds, crows, robins, scrub jays, finches, and hawks, that too have resigned. They rest where we have given up, eat from the overgrown lots. I came here out of circumstance, and am now surrounded by organ meat, diesel fuel, rusted radiators, dandelions, overgrown rhododendrons covered with dead blossoms, pit bulls and babushkas wearing yentas who roll their metal carts full of dinged boxes. Soon, a few desperate farmers will pull out what they've grown on the rain-soaked dirt and gravel. Anything to survive, bring in some money and vitamins. I had a family of raccoons living in my eaves last summer. At night, they would stare at me from the corner of my roof. I suppose the lesson I was meant to learn was that anyone can make a home out of anything, so long as you're comfortable with your lot. But the rest of us don't seem comfortable. I toss and turn at night. Everyone fidgets with their fingers. And even though these are still somewhat my people, from the Ukraine, from Staten Island, from the far Pacific, and from what was once all of Mexico, something doesn't translate. Not even my grandmother wore a babushka, and her collapsible shopping cart was left behind years ago. Cigarettes soon after. I've hung on to caraway seeds, sticky rice, the talisman that hangs next to my front door, and a blind faith and hard work. But I'm no longer sure that it's enough to build community with. For all the interest that we have in each other, the only dialogue is exchanged with loose change. Chessboards and park benches have disappeared. My name is never called, my shoulder never tapped, and yesterday, as quickly as the man died on the asphalt, near silence has returned. The crows squawk and the car's bass remain the only conversation. On Sunday mornings, the bell from the church up the road ring, but I've yet to hear a single lullaby. This is a place where even the ugly have a hard time falling in love, and only the lucky can recognize beauty. But we're trying. For God's sake, I know that I am, harder than I've ever done before. Here, the one who walked elsewhere runs, the one who ran now flies, the one who flew becomes holy. And no matter who I am now, and no matter what I have done, to have a block of whores closer to me than a good cup of black coffee, no matter that my hands are full of slivers, and my feet are finally beginning to crack, no matter, I want to be holy. All right, I'm just gonna read two more. I'm gonna read an old poem, man. This is like seriously old. It's a long time. This was maybe, like when your first poem got taken by like a journal that wasn't like stapled and photocopied in somebody's basement. Like this was before the internet had poems on it. This is, like I got it. It was like, oh my God, I'm so excited. This is that poem. It's called Quietly Waiting. Henry Miller said that if God had to choose a place to hide, he would choose man to hide in. I agree, and let me add that this man would live in Orange County, California. In fact, it might be me. He might be hiding at this moment in the corner of my colon or on the tip of my larynx, possibly in the crease of my lower lip, places that are seemingly never used and touched by no one. God feels safe within me, like a chicken embryo in a shell, seeing only white, only rabid hazy skies, the hearts of palm trees, listening to the business of business and so on, the sound of loose change in my pockets, lawnmowers, and janitorial mops. But for all it matters, God could just as easily perch on my shoulder, still just as safe. The only ones seeking him fear him, as it says on the bumper sticker. Both of us alive and well, both of us with no messages on our answering machines, without fear of being unmasked or losing our suntans. Both of us quietly waiting. You know how old that poem is because there's answering machines in the poem, right? All right. One last one, which so today's my birthday. It's exciting.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Here with my wife, having a lovely time. So I always like to read a poem for her. This is called Arc. 1. Men with thick 3-day-old beards, no better than acquaintances, drop their torches and draw me in. I take their embrace and embrace them back. My dog, only, shows no pity. She stands by the door, leash in mouth, and calls me idiot, over and over. 14 years old, she has not forgotten the holes in the yard where I've buried my old bones. 2. I want to be the man in Chagall's Over the Town, strong enough to lift you up so that you can fly and take me. Instead, I am again the chicken-hearted, huddled by the fence, he who mumbles prayers. In the distance, there is a red house where I know our future lies. I can get there by crawling, so long as you promise to meet me. Thanks, everybody.